Hello again, friends. This is Mike, and today's podcast is going to be both audio and video, although I'm doing it old school on a cell phone. But the subject is unusual. The past couple podcasts I've done have dealt with relatively normal things, if you will, and not some of the crazy things. And part of the whole Soul Unleashed podcast effort is to share with you things that I've been open to, or at least open to exploring. So stand by. I think you'll find this interesting. It involves the concept of walk-in souls, or soul walk-ins, if you will. Hello again. So what I'm going to talk about today is soul walk-ins. Now, I came across this concept really just recently. I'd never heard of it before, and my sister, who also has some of her own gifts in terms of healing, told me that she'd heard this concept and she was interested in it. A walk-in soul, and forgive me, I have to look at some notes when I'm talking about this, but it's a certain belief in metaphysical and spiritual circles that a new soul can choose to enter an already living human body. So, I kid you not. It will replace the soul that was originally there. Now, there's different types, and I'll talk about the six different types of walk-in souls. But that's generally the concept. If you're going about your daily life, and then you kind of become a different person because a different soul walked into your body. Now, this is not demonic possession. This is not anything evil or sinister, but it is the concept that you agreed to this before you came into this incarnation. You and this other soul have worked this out. This is part of the plan, and it's generally associated with your current soul. It's referred to in the circles that deal in this kind of stuff as the natal soul, Natal. So the natal soul is your intrinsic soul with which you're born, and that soul is replaced by the walk-in soul. And you agree long before you come into this lifetime that you will finish your mission, the mission of your natal soul, at a certain point, and then the walk-in will take over. How this happens, according to the people that think they're walk-in souls, excuse me, is there some type of experience that you go through. That experience could be near-death experience, a accident, a traumatic experience. There's different stories. The one book that I'm referring to mostly throughout this discussion, because I started to read on the web and also different books, but there's a book called The Cosmology of the Soul. It's by a lady named Sheila Seppi, Seppi. In the Cosmology of the Soul, Sheila goes through what she thinks soul walk-ins are. She thinks she is one, and then she explains kind of what that experience was like for her. So, the origin of philosophy, just a couple points up front here. The origin of philosophy of this goes back, at least in the United States, to New Age spiritualism, which took root about the 1970s. I think Shirley MacLaine wrote a book, and there's been a number of literature and books that really explored this. Probably the seminal work was something called Strangers Among Us by Ruth Montgomery. And there's numerous websites, online forums, and books that talk about people that believe they're walk-in souls and what their experience has been. Individuals who believe they're walk-in souls have experienced a sudden shift in tastes and attitudes, a new identity, even different beliefs and memories. They feel strongly disconnected from the life that they walk into. So in a couple of these examples I'll talk about, that's what these people have experienced, and they've struggled to understand why for them this happened. So that's where it comes from, the origin of philosophy. It really dates back to way back to shamanistic and Hinduistic practices. So it's not something that just came up in the 70s, but it generally kind of caught hold here in the United States in the 70s. The challenges of being a walk-in soul, or at least believing in this concept, are pretty obvious, right? If you're listening to this podcast, you're someone who has an interest in spiritual things. You may come from, like me, a strong religious background, Catholic background, this concept of a walk-in soul is completely foreign to anything that we as Catholics believe or Christians believe. Obviously, we believe that God made us. God made us a unique soul. It inherits our body, and that body is a corporal, temporary thing here on earth. And when we die, our soul goes someplace else. The body returns to earth or returns to dust, returns to ashes, and our soul goes to another dimension. Now, there's a lot of different theories or religious beliefs on what happens when our soul splits from our body and it goes to be with God or goes to sleep till the final judgment or is judged immediately, judged later. All those things I've talked about in previous podcasts, and I, I'm not here to say I believe in one thing or another in that regard, but have come to believe, as if you listen to my podcast, you know this. I have come to believe that we do return many, many times to this particular existence on Earth, and the purpose of our soul is to experience this world, to experience love, and to experience this world for Source, for Creator. I don't think we're here to be judged. I don't think we're here to be tested. I don't think we're here to pass some type of ultimate test that determines whether we spend eternity in a sea of fire. But that's a whole different discussion. I will say, however, that this concept of walk-in souls does not jive with even that understanding in terms of coming back many times or reincarnation. Because even for that to happen, you're a unique soul. You come here, you live. Now, according to the lady Miss Seppi that wrote this book and some other people, the concept of a walk-in soul happens to very, very few people. It's rare, and it's planned. And the reason it's planned, and man, this gets into all kinds of weird stuff. The reason it's planned is because, according to people that believe in this, we are in the third dimension, and we're ascending. The mission of our souls on Earth is over billions of years to ascend from third dimension to fifth dimension to whatever the highest dimension is, where you don't even need a body anymore. You're just a soul of energy and light. I guess that's the 12th dimension or whatever. Anyway, us Cro-Magnon types are stuck in the third dimension, and we're struggling to get to the fifth dimension. And the walk-in are generally beings or souls of higher intelligence, higher experience. Wait till you hear where they come from. But they come from other places, and they take over your body, and by agreement, and then your soul goes away, and the other soul comes in. And this is perfect fodder for a movie, because when you hear some of these stories, these people go through stuff that would make a great movie. They wake up one day and they don't really know what they're doing and who they are, and they don't know how to make coffee, and they don't know how to do stuff they've always done, and invariably it leads to problems with, surprise, your spouse or your husband or your wife or your partner or somebody that you've spent a lot of time with, in some cases 20, 30, 40 years, and suddenly you're a different person. So, and usually you were screwed up beforehand because you were you were unhappy, and then you have a new soul come in, and now you're really screwed up. I'm sorry if anybody out there believes in this walk-in concept. I'm not making fun of it. I just find it very hard to grasp. But needless to say, there's a lot of skepticism in scientific circles, and if you were to ask anybody that is a counselor or deals with psychiatric issues, this type of unhappiness or feeling disassociated or disconnected from who you were before is usually explained, that experience is explained in terms of dissociative identity disorder or other psychological phenomena that you might be experiencing. I'm not sure there's many licensed clinical people that believe in walk-ins, but there are many people that talk to people they believe in walk-ins and consult them. Anyway, it's a very unusual concept. So what I want to talk about is the different types of walk-ins. So first of all, there's three different aspects of the soul that can come in and occupy your body. The first is that souls can incarnate or come from a different, I don't even know how to pronounce this word, Shiantiascan. Shiantiascan. I'll put it in show notes. It's a fancy word for meaning that your uber soul or your oversoul. So uh, you've got this oversoul, and a piece of you is here in this experience, inhabiting this body, going about life and doing your own thing, and eating, drinking, sleeping, whatever. And then the soul that comes into you, the walk-in soul, can be a piece of your oversoul, or whatever that fancy word is, Shiantiascan. Uh, that piece of the you that comes into you is from that larger uber soul. So that's one option. It can also be from a different uber soul, and mostly that's the case. It's a different soul, not part of your own. The fourth thing is that it can be from your own soul family or different soul family, the group that you travel with. And this is the cool part. It can come from either this planet, Earth, or another galaxy or another dimension. And and finally, it can come from all different combinations of that. So, um, yeah, I'm not even going to try to explain all that jazz, but those are the I guess the 4 or 5 characteristics of what a soul could be that comes into you. Now, there's one, two, three, four, five, two, three, four, 6 different types of souls or experiences that the soul can come into you, and it's a soul exchange, a soul infusion, a soul overlay, a soul braid, like to braid your hair, a soul jumper, or a layered soul. So, just real quick, I'm going to explain what they are, and take it for what it's worth. But a soul exchange occurs when that's kind of the basic thing. Your natal soul is here. You have this experience. You wake up in the hospital later, or you have this terrible sickness or near-death experience, whatever. But when you wake up, you feel different because the new soul has come in. The soul exchange is what most people talk about when they say I feel like I'm a walk-in soul. I never heard anybody never heard anybody say that even in a bar. But anyway, that's the classic walk-in scenario for somebody that says they're a walk-in. And a soul infusion, the second one, occurs when part of the natal soul remains and the newer, higher vibrational soul comes in. Now, again, higher vibrational. The whole point of this soul exchange thing is to get you from the fifth or the third dimension Cro-Magnon thing up until the next dimension. And the theory or the motivation behind all this walk-in stuff is that these souls are coming into this existence, to Earth, inhabiting some people in different ways, and the purpose is to elevate the human race to where we get to the next dimension. I don't know what dimension we're going to. I don't think it's the fourth dimension. For some reason, we skip the fourth and we go to the fifth. Who knows? Back when the fifth dimension sang songs, when I was growing up, they were just a band, the fifth dimension. But now it means something to me. So anyway, the soul infusion is when a portion of the natal soul remains, a new higher vibrational soul comes in, and it melds with the natal soul, and they become a single soul, but they've got pieces of both together. In the first example I told you about, the soul exchange, new one comes in, old one goes out. There's a lot of memory problems. People apparently don't remember their children, they don't remember their husband, they don't remember their job or how to do stuff. In a soul infusion where these two merge, there's more memory that the soul retains, and so it's less jarring to the individual. Again, this is all coordinated before you're born. Soul overlay. A soul overlay is the third type. An overlay occurs when the natal soul remains and another soul enters at the same time in harmonious fashion. It's an agreed upon arrangement. The natal soul is kind of an observer and watches what the other soul is doing, and the overlay soul covers the natal soul like a neoprene suit covers the physical body. That's the example they use. It's like surfers wear neoprene suits. The overlay soul covers the natal soul in that kind of protective covering, and they work. The oversoul the new soul does its work while the natal soul kind of rests and recovers. They remain separate, and then when the work is done or complete, one of them leaves. It doesn't have to be the old soul that leaves. The new soul can leave after it does its job. So that's soul overlay. Soul braid is the next type. Soul braid is a bit more complicated. Both souls occupy the body at the same time. Both of them are aware of each other. It's not that they fight for control, but the braided souls come and go at will. So the new soul does not attach to the body; it just comes in, goes out, comes in, goes out. Sometimes the braid will arrive to assist the natal soul and just help propel them to the next level of service, and then leave. But anyway, they work together for a few days, a few months, a few years, but they always retain their individuality, and then the braided soul leaves. Two more types: soul jumpers. Soul jumpers move in and out of a body over a period of hours, days, weeks, or months. Very brief experiences. The new soul inhabits the body to accomplish a very specific goal and then leaves. It's different from a braided soul, which comes and goes for a period of time. The jumper comes in, does this thing, and then is gone. And then finally, soul layering. Soul layering is when there's multiple aspects are put together again. It's kind of a dance where there's the new soul and the old soul, but they work together. They are aware of each other. They move in and out of the host body for various lengths of time, and it can go on for years. But it's called a creative dance as they elevate the consciousness of the soul. So there you have it. That is that is the concept of a walk-in soul. So who cares, right? So I was reading this. What's funny is the stories about this. So not funny, and in some cases they're not. None of these people are happy. That is one consistent theme: is none of these people that are experienced the whole soul thing are happy with what's gone on. So it doesn't sound like a very pleasing thing for me. But these are people that are going through very difficult times. They have a very difficult experience, and then when they awaken from whatever the sickness is, sometimes it happens overnight, sometimes it happens in an instant. They just know that they're not the same person. There's some examples of a woman, for example, that she came back and she didn't understand or appreciate her husband. The feeling quickly became mutual because she wasn't the woman that he had married. They had 3 or 4 children, and her goal of her new soul, as she understood it, was to protect the children and raise them a certain way, which didn't jive with what the husband wanted to do. Sounds like a pretty screwed up arrangement personally, but that's the way it was set up. And so she eventually took off with the kids. This happened in Canada in the 90s, and she went and lived someplace else. He didn't know where she went. Nowadays that would be considered certainly a Amber Alert or something, but she felt that she had to leave, and it was because she felt differently about stuff. Another woman had the same kind of experience, and she was an outgoing type and with a party type, and 10 o'clock her night was just starting. She'd go till 4 in the morning. She had a lot of friends and drinking and everything. When she got the new soul experience, nothing about that interested her anymore. She couldn't drink alcohol. She was driven to only drink healthy food, eat healthy food, went to bed very early, and so her friends changed very quickly. Her whole life changed, and she swapped out all these old friends for new friends, and she was very unhappy for a couple of years until she came across somebody that explained to her what the heck she was going through. Another lady was gifted with singing and acting and writing, and when she had the experience, she could no longer do any of those things. In fact, she was in the last step of her thesis or something, and she tried to write it, and it was garbage. And the guy that was her advisor, asked her what the heck was wrong with her, that it was all garbage that she was producing, and she never finished her thesis. So she went on other things, I guess, teaching about being a soul. So those are some examples of of people that went through this experience, and as I mentioned, it sounds like an unhappy experience. Um, and then you're led to learn about this. One last quick story was a woman that was going through this, and she something was happening to her. She didn't know what it was. She felt disconnected from everything, and her mother came to her one day and said, "Here, you need to read this book." And the book was what I was just talking to you about earlier. The Strangers Among Us by Ruth Montgomery. So her mother said, "You need to read this book." She said, "No, I want nothing to do with it. I don't, nothing's wrong with me." And then about a week later, a guy that she knew, one of her mentors, I think, with what she was doing in school, said to her, "Here, you need to read this book." And it was Strangers Among Us by Ruth Montgomery. And she said, "No, I don't want to have anything to do with this book." And then she met this guy, and they met on some type of spiritual thing. They'd both read some kind of spiritual book. Anyway, they started talking, and he brought up the book Strangers Among Us, and he gave it to her. She said, "Oh my gosh, you're the third person approaching me about this, and what's it about?" And he told her that it was about walk-in souls. And she read it, and she was amazed by it, and she identified with it. And so she went back to her mother, and she said, "Hey, thank you so much for bringing this book to me. I really appreciate it." And the mother said, "What are you talking about? I don't know what you're talking about." And so they talked, and her mother had no recollection of bringing her the book or showing her the book. They went through all her mother's books in the house. They couldn't find it. Her mother never heard of it. Same thing with the guy that was her mentor at school. Never heard of it. Didn't remember offering it to her. Nothing. So the point is that once you start this journey, if any of you are listening to this and you think you're a walk-in soul, don't come to me because I don't know anything about it really. But the concept is these two books, Strangers Among Us and The Cosmology of the Soul, are good places to start. And of course, there's a ton of resources on the internet now about walk-in souls. But the point is, you will be led to figure out whether you're a walk-in soul or not. So that is that's the story of walk-in soul. My hope is that if a walk-in soul takes over me, I'll wake up and be able to be a scratch golfer. That would be great, but I don't see that happening. Anyway, forgive me for being flip about this thing. Although I'm going through the Soul Unleashed process, this is something I'm looking at least considering that this might be a possibility. But as you can tell, I'm not quite there in terms of believing it. I haven't even told you where some of these souls come from. Believe me, they're on spaceships. Okay, I mean, a lot of these walk-in souls. Hopefully, hopefully none of them are here. But anyway, they're aliens, and they to us they'd be aliens. They come from different galaxies, different dimensions. They're piloting spaceships, and they decide to come to as part of the walk-in agreement. So, yeah, if you read the book The Cosmology of the Soul, she talks about the different star seeds and those kind of things that come here, and it's super super interesting, but not for me yet. Anyway, friends, that is a brief overlay of walk-in souls. I hope you found it interesting. A lot of what I spoke to you about and the references to the books will be in the show notes. And I look forward to, I'm doing a number of interviews, as I mentioned before. Hopefully I'll have some of those for you soon, some great people. None of them are walk-in souls as far as I know, but I'm going to ask people from now on when I do an interview if they're unusual enough, if they're walk-in souls, and see where we go from there. All right, thanks. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.